Welcome to my podcast, Conversations with David. I'm your host, David Owasi, and on this podcast, we are speaking with accomplished entrepreneurs and professionals across the country, and in this case, across North America. And we're learning about what keeps them passionate, what keeps them going, and we're also learning some insights along the way. Now, I'm here with someone I have huge respect for, John Anton, very, very accomplished. Why don't you introduce yourself, John?
Hey, David, thanks for having me on the podcast. My name is Johnny Anton. My birth name is John, but everybody's been calling me Johnny unless I'm in trouble. So you can call me Johnny. And I know I look just like the everyday American, or maybe I look Irish with my red beard, but my family's actually from Iraq. We came here in the 70s and 80s, and I'm a first generation refugee from Iraq, from religiously persecuted camps from radicalists in the Middle East. And my family got political asylum, thank God, to the Marine Corps in the United States. So, we were blessed to come into the United States in the 70s, 80s, and I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I went to school in Chicago, went to University of Chicago, one of the best schools in the world. I don't tell people that to impress upon them. I tell that to impress upon them that, that school never, even though it was prestigious, never gave me the tools to be successful that I needed. And quite frankly, I didn't know how to network back then to even maximize the alumni association like I should have. And now, I have a agency called Close With Us, where we help people who are in the coaching, consulting, information, online education system space, whether you have an agency or you're a coach or a consultant, or you have a high ticket offer where you're selling something $1,000 up until $100,000 or more. I am revolutionizing sales in that marketplace, in that niche, in that vertical, by training closers to be ethical and placing them in entrepreneurs' businesses and training them to be heart-centered and putting people first and profit second. And so that's what I'm a stand for. I also have a nonprofit called ThroughYou.org, and we build schools and water wells in developing countries in Africa, which you're from Africa, as well as Guatemala and Dominican Republic. So I'm very blessed to say we have 3 projects that we've built, and we have a 4th one in Senegal on the way. And so, that's what I'm passionate about is social impact, teaching entrepreneurs how to give back while they build wealth, and teaching people that they don't have to be their past, and they can build high income skill sets and do it ethically and not be this slimy salesperson in the economy, and really add value to businesses and change their financial future for themselves and their families. So that's what I'm passionate about, and I'm excited to talk about today.
Fascinating stuff, John. I really, really appreciate you introducing yourself there. And I've checked out your projects, your non-for-profit, really, really cool stuff you're doing there. And of course, your journey has been really, really impressive, just considering your background. Funny thing is actually you and we share some similarities in a way where, we moved to a different country. Our families did move to a different country, and that definitely has affected and changed our lives as we know it. And of course, we're very grateful for this new life, but also it's very important to kind of just look at the whole picture. But the first question I wanted to ask you, Johnny, was, you started out in sales, right? What really got you interested in sales in the first place? Why were you interested in sales? A lot of people sometimes are scared to go into the world of sales as to build their career. But why did you were you interested?
I'm gonna say something like wildly erratic, and it's very contradicting to what I do. But I thought sales was for boiler room, unethical people who are highly manipulative. And I thought it was something that people with a college degree, quite frankly, that, I had from a top 5 university, top 3 at the time. And I just was so arrogant as a 22-year-old kid coming out of college. I had no idea I was ever going to do sales. And I had no idea everything was sales at the time, right? I didn't know that when you go to a doctor, they're just trying to sell you a prescription, and you're actually selling them your symptoms, right? You're giving them your symptoms, you're selling them what you need and what help you need, and they're giving you the help by selling you their service or, their prescription that they're going to give you. And when you go to a lawyer, it's the same thing. You're selling them on your defense case, and they're selling you on how they're going to get you off whatever issue that you got into the law. So before I knew every conversation was an opportunity to influence people, I thought sales was actually something you do when you're uneducated.
Right.
So bad, I know.
That is,
So yeah.
that's an interesting definition.
Well, because you just didn't have to have anything but a GED to get a sales job, and it was like, oh, that's just something. And I tried sales when I was a kid. I was 16. I worked for a front desk of a hotel and I was selling hospitality. And I found it to be like, quite easy. I thought it was very easy back then because I was talking to these high level, like automotive industry people who were staying at hotels that I was working at. And, and they always thought I was like 19 or 20 because of the way I carried myself. I was always like that kid that was always just trying to look good and always just pretending that I was perfect, and I just never really knew how to be in my skin. And I would put on a front a lot. And so anybody watching this, like a lot of times when people are arrogant or when they're overly confident, it's not that sometimes it's because they're still dealing with insecurity. A lot of times it's because of that. And I know it was that for me. And other times people are just very, very confident, don't care what people think. And that's awesome. That's the highest form of confidence, right? But it's also polarizing and can create a lot of negativity and enemies and people who resent you and whatnot. And we'll get into that later. But to answer your question, I was trained as a Middle Eastern coming from Iraq. You had three choices. You either were a doctor, a lawyer, or you were disowned. And so I was like, all right, I love my mom. I love my dad. I love my brothers. I don't want to be disowned. So I started at the University of Chicago as a pre-medicine, major, as wanting to get into medical school or a dentist, right? And so, and as I shadowed dentists and doctors, I realized that they didn't really have much time for lifestyle and family. And I was like, well, this doesn't really add up because yes, they're helping people, which I want to do. They're also making, money. But when it came down to it, as much as they were working the lifestyle, I was like, when are they ever going to enjoy the money? They're 40 or 50. And, I only saw doctors and dentists and lawyers that were like 50 with their Rolls Royces and with their, Lamborghinis and things. And I was like, I don't want to be 60 when I'm like wealthy, or rich for that matter. And so I said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way where you can be rich and help people. And so, I started poking around the career office and I said, listen, I love science. I love being pre-medical major, but I just don't think it's the future for me. And I shadowed these doctors and they just looked very unhappy and quite ill for a doctor, just like being in the residency, like living by their pager and sleepless nights. Like that didn't sound sexy to me. You know what I mean? And so I was like, well, this is just off. Like, and how much do doctors really even make? And at the time, Obama was coming with like maybe a socialism package for medical, and they were talking about general practitioners were going to go from like 400K a year to 100K a year. And I'm like, holy cow, what's a job that I can get out of college where I can potentially make 100K? So I went to the career office and they said, you should look into private equity or investment banking. We have the #1 division for hedge funds and private equity, and all the CEOs of the top financial institutions went to University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And so I had the honor and privilege to take classes there took a lot of economics and financial accounting, corporate finance classes with some of the most brilliant minds, like Nobel Prize winners and even managing directors for investment banks. And so I had this mind, like I was set to be an investment banker. And so I did an internship in Manhattan and I was sleeping under my desk at 100-hour work weeks. And I was like, holy cow, this is no different than being a resident doctor, and then I kind of was like, okay, well, this is just what you have to do. You have to eat crap to be rich and to be wealthy. And this is just what I have to do. And so I decided my dad said, before you take those offers on Wall Street, when I graduated, go and here's some money, go and enjoy, summer in San Diego. And he said, here's some money. He gave me some graduation money for my graduation party as a gift, as a parting gift for, being someone who graduated. I was a poor college kid at the time. And I said, okay, great. This is amazing. So he put me in a condo on the beach in San Diego. And I'm literally waking up every day and I'm like running by the ocean, eating avocados and almonds. And, and my dad, I grew up really poor with my mom, but my dad became rich in real estate. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, I can always go work with my dad, but I don't want to be one of those kids that's just like rich and works with his dad, especially because I grew up super in poverty with my mom and they got divorced at a young age. And so long story short, I fell into a sales job because I applied to 80 jobs in San Diego. I could not find a single job. I started promoting for nightclubs because I was like, okay, rich people are spending money at bottle service. I know that from my time in Chicago going out clubbing. So I started like trying to meet rich people, and I found three different types of rich people: people who are military retired or military defense, and they were in missile creation and missile launch and UAVs and all that cool stuff, where they were, in a branch of the military and they got their pension and everything. And then there was real estate, which people were in commercial real estate and hospitality and what my family was into. And I was like, this is intimidating because you have to have a lot of money to do this. And then the third thing was actually information marketing. And I was like, what is information marketing? And don't people go to school to consume information? Like, I didn't quite understand what that meant. And so I kind of like brushed it off. But after applying to 80 jobs, I couldn't even get a single consulting job with my degree. My degree, it worked like this, right? You get hedge funds, private equity. That was the upper echelon. Then the step below was buy side, sell side of Wall Street, which was investment banking and also private equity. And then you could be a PricewaterhouseCoopers consultant, and that's the lower level tier. And then there was marketing consultant, where you could work for like GoDaddy and be like an $80,000 a year marketing director, and and start off as an associate and build yourself up to 150 or 200K as a marketing consultant. And I had the degree to do any of those routes. And then the lowest level that everybody frowned upon at my career office, in my family and in my friend circle, and everyone said I was an idiot, but it was sales. And and they said, like, that's the lowest level. You don't even need a college degree, Johnny. Like, why would you go to the best school in the world and then not pursue something in this like upper echelon of career opportunities? And I was just like, well, when I met the owner of this company, I walked up the stairs and they were kind of reading from scripts and they were like throwing lacrosse balls. And I was like, this is kind of like Wall Street, like sales and trading. Like, they're throwing footballs, they're drinking, except it was different. Like in Wall Street, they were like pounding freaking, espresso shots and doing drugs and stimulants like Adderall so they can focus all day. Whereas like here in San Diego, they were doing like kale juices and they were drinking and they were going, they had surfboards downstairs and they were like, radical, bro, let's shred the gnar. And they would like literally run 2 blocks and then like surf during lunch. And I was like, this is the coolest freaking thing ever. Like, I don't even care how much money I make. This lifestyle is crazy. So I took the 100% commission sales job. I didn't even know what real estate education was. I didn't even know what information marketing was. I didn't know what online education were. I didn't even know what seminars were at all. I just took the job blindly because of the culture, and they had me reading a book a week. I was like, I hadn't read a book a week since college. And and so I was just like obsessed with the personal development and growth. And I was like an arrogant jerk when I first started at the company. And then I saw like what it did to my relationships, and I was financially rich, but I was spiritually poor. And long story short, the rest is history. I struggled for 8 or 9 weeks, and then I cracked the code, and the rest is history. I broke every single sales record in the company's history. And they were a very successful company before I walked on board. I was the youngest person they ever hired. After me, they started changing the whole recruitment model to find people who wanted to not do investment banking and wanted lifestyle. And so they started recruiting people from my college, from East Coast. And they're like, we're going to get young, hungry, gritty people from like hardworking countries like that emigrated. And like they had this whole like avatar they built around me, and they just started recruiting based on that. And so I realized I had like some special formula for sales. And I started to really start teaching the whole company sales. And then I realized like, wow, I'm 23 years old and I'm revolutionizing a $300 million seminar company. And they're relying on me for how to sell, which was crazy to me that I was able to catapult myself to the top that fast. But I got really big headed and I had to do a lot of personal development and coaching and hire coaches and consultants and do seminars and deep spiritual work, like deep work. I did a lot of deep work the past 5 or 6 years, and it altered my life. And that's why I help coaches and consultants, because without coaches and consultants, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, where I can honestly say I'm confident. And I'm also, looking to get better every single day. I never admit that I'm the best. And, that's the right attitude that I found that you have to have with this to be the best at anything you do.
Wow, fascinating story, Johnny. Thanks for sharing that. I almost pictured myself on that beach as you were telling the story of your San Diego experience. And, I've been to San Diego and I quite can picture some of those scenes there. So thank you for sharing that. Now, one of the things that really stood out to me, Johnny, was it sounded like there was a transformation, and that transformation started from the intentionality to do that work on yourself, the personal development and growth aspect. Can you just share a little bit more insight on what that was like and why that was truly, truly transformational for you, from coming from being a jerk, full of yourself, not kind of sure about the direction of your life, to someone having a purpose, having some more clarity, and having some more confidence in yourself? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think it all started, it all really started in kind of a backstory was like when I was 17 years old, I struggled to be good at any sport until I was 17 years old, and I was
Mm,
ranked in the state of Michigan for wrestling. And I remember my brothers were all the star athletes growing up, and I was like a late bloomer. And
mm,
I was 17, I was finally like ranked in the state of Michigan. And I can never forget, like, I just wanted my dad, who I never really grew up with, to come to one of my wrestling meets. And he was a really busy business owner, and he really didn't like my mom because they just had so much tension in their marriage and why they got divorced. And so, I called him and I said, hey, listen, I've never been very good at sports up until now. And I feel confident that I'm going to win in this championship. And I want to share that moment with my dad. Like, can you be there? And he's like, son, and his thick Middle Eastern accent. He's like, listen, son, I love you. And I have a very busy day. This is very last second, but I will see about maybe coming and I will let you know. Okay. And I said, all right. And I'm like, I hang up. I'm like 17-year-old. I'm like giddy, like a little kid inside. I'm like jumping up inside. I'm like, oh my God, he might come. He might come. And it was like before I had any self-esteem, really. It's crazy. And I was just like, oh my God, my dad's gonna come watch me wrestle and win this championship. I'm super excited. So I'm like pacing back and forth, warming up before the meet, and I see my opponent and I see him across. I'm like, okay, we're like 3 matches out, and I keep looking at the door every second to see if my dad comes. And I just don't see my dad, and we're like 2 people out. Now I'm on deck, and I'm like next up. I'm like, oh, I don't think my dad's gonna come.
mm,
And the very possible last second that he could come, where I could still see him, he came in, and with my brothers, my 2 brothers, my little brother Nate and my bigger brother Jacob. And I'm like,
mm,
holy cow, I didn't tell him to bring my brothers. Like, so now I've got all this pressure. They go up in the stands and see my dad. He's literally wearing like freaking Versace sunglasses. He can't even like he had prescription sunglasses. He would just wear them indoors, and everybody would just think he was this like mafia guy, this like mob.
mm,
It was so funny because he actually looks Middle Eastern, as opposed to like I take after my mom, which is she's Middle Eastern too, but she's very white looking.
mm,
And so, going back, he's in the stands, and I come up to the line with the opponent. I jump up and I kick my legs in the air like a split. And he had never seen me do anything athletic like that, and nobody quite did. And the whole crowd erupted when I did that. When I was like jumping up, and they're like, "Wow, this guy's really athletic, and he's gonna probably crush this, this kid in the championship." And I could never forget the match started, and all I could do is just disappear and go over there, like in the stands. And I wasn't even in the match. I
mm,
became totally not present. And little did I know that this kid came from a lineage of state champions, and he was ranked 3rd in the state of Michigan. And I hadn't done any of my homework. And that's when I realized you got to do your homework. You got to prepare your plan, work your plan. And I just got starched by this guy, like absolutely starched. And back then I had braces. So he was slamming my head in the mat, and I was bleeding all from my mouth. And I can never forget, I was just like getting like thrown around like ragdoll. Like I had never been ragdoll like this in my wrestling career. And like my brothers like beat me up growing up, and they were twice my size. And I'm confident till this day that dude could ragdoll my brothers at the time. And so, I'm just bloody, and I lose the match, and I'm sitting there and I'm crying like a little girl. And my brother comes up to me and he's like, man, tough loss, man, bro. You'll get him next time. And like, all I wanted my dad to do is say that same thing. And he took his glasses off and he came up to me. He's like, listen, son, if you think this was exciting for me to see you get hurt like that, then you have a long time coming. You need to quit this sport immediately. And you need to get out of this sport. This is bullshit. And he just like walked out. And I was just so angry. And at that moment, I created a story, right? See, what happened was my dad told me that he was like, didn't want to watch me get beat up. And he really just wanted me to be safe. He just cared for me as a dad. And we as human beings, what we do is things happen to us, and then we create stories about them. And so I created this story that my dad didn't love me. and that my dad didn't support who I was. And what happened, David, was I had this chip on my shoulder bigger than the Empire State Building that moment forward. And I was like, became this angry kid where I was like, I'm going to prove everybody wrong about wrestling. And so I had my coach write me a check for $1,500. I didn't even ask him for it. He's like, go to this wrestling camp. And that kid went to that wrestling camp. And 3 other opponents that starched me that year went to this wrestling camp. And it was a 28-day wrestling camp, 4 workouts a day for 28 days straight in University of Minnesota Golden Gopher campus. They were the national champions 3 years in a row at the time. They had Olympic wrestlers there. They had Brock Lesnar was there. They had, they had, national champion after national champion in every freaking weight class. And every athlete that went there was a state champion in their individual state. And that's when I realized, like, not only do you got to work your plan, but you got to surround yourself in the environment with high performers. You want to be a high performer, you got to be around high performers, and you got to do what they do. And then we were doing hypnosis at night after our 4 workouts, and they would bring an Army Ranger or a Navy SEAL, and they would share a story, David, about how they were in Iraq and Ramadi and got dropped from the sky in a care package. And they were like a human being dropped in a care package, David. And all they had were supplements and nutrients and IVs. And they would piss crap themselves crawling in the middle of the night so that the enemy UAV wouldn't see them. All they could take a sniper shot from a vantage point to the enemy that they never even took. And they would crawl for 2 weeks, like losing 17 pounds. Like, these were special ops Navy SEALs that were coaching us at the camp on mindset and psychology. And then they would hypnotize us to visualize the national championship or the state championship and walk through every single possible scenario so that we could know that we were going to win with certainty. And then I realized the power of visualization. And so I thought I was going to a wrestling camp, David, but I went to a camp that freaking changed my life forever and made me like this intense, passionate individual. Before that, I was very shy and had no self-esteem. And I realized you could change your whole identity. And I still had that chip on my shoulder, and I'd walk into it with sales and I bring it into my sales floor after college. And I was always trying to prove people wrong. And I was always trying to be better than everybody. And I realized I became really rich, but I had this distance with me and people where, I wasn't invited to all the family dinners. I wasn't invited to, the outings and stuff. And people respected me, like, dude, you're passionate. I love your energy, and you're really good at what you're doing. You're really smart. But this isn't like the dinner for you. And I started to see I wasn't getting invited to like really nice people that I admired dinner, my colleagues. And I started to really question, wow, what is it that distances me with people? Because I can really like who I am on the phone is completely different than who I am, out there. And I realized I was rich and my bank account was stacked, but I had my social account and my spiritual account and my relationship account was empty, was actually negative. And then I realized, wow, to answer your question, there's levels and there's all these inflection points that you can come up across. And it's all about the stories you tell yourself along the way. And that's why the first thing I do with all my salespeople, even my entrepreneurs that are high level, I see what stories they're operating from. I see what's limiting them with their stories. What are they telling themselves? What are they telling people around them that's enforcing an idea that isn't quite real? That's just a false perception. And so I start with perception is reality, and your perception is everything. And if you can alter your perception, you can alter your reality. And I needed to alter how I saw myself and others in the world. And I needed to make a decision. And most people, they want better relationships, or they want more money in their bank account, or they want to start a nonprofit, but they just can't quite stop telling themselves the stories of why they can't do it. And they keep not understanding that they have blind spots that they can't see in their relationships. They can't even observe themselves day to day. And so they have to either take a point of view perspective, an impartial spectator on their own life, and observe their life from the outside or up above. And that's why I love coaches and consultants and spiritual workers and transformational, mentors, because what they do is they identify things that you don't know about yourself in different areas of your life. And once you become aware of what you're unaware of, you can actually do something about it. And so I had to actually observe that I didn't have quite good relationships and didn't have quite good interactions, even though I was rich. And so I realized, like, wow, I'm rich, but I'm still a dick to my mother, right? And she's the one who put me in this position where I have all these gifts, and yet I'm arguing with her and slamming the phone in her face because how I perceive her as a negative person. And I started doing a lot of deep work. I went to transformational seminars. I hired coaches. I spent over $100,000 on my personal development and training. And I never shy away from telling people that if you have any money in your bank account, don't buy real estate, don't do Forex, invest it in yourself. That's the best investment you can make, because you are an asset. You are the most important asset to invest into, right? Don't be following all this like GameStop and Robinhood stuff. You are the best investment you can possibly invest into right now, whether you have $1,000 or $100,000. And quite frankly, I never met anybody that became wealthy that hadn't invested $100,000 at least into themselves. And I always see people that are stuck, and I'm always like, how much did you invest? And they're always like 5,000, but I don't have quite enough to invest that 100 that you invested. And I'm like, well, you have to invest and keep going, and then increase your skill sets and make more money, and then keep reinvesting in yourself. It's not the monetary amount. It's just the amount I found that it takes to interact with enough coaches saying the same things, where you realize, oh my God, it's not the information, it's my behavior that needs to shift. It's not the actual, a code that they're giving me. There's not some special thing that they're going to tell me that anyone else isn't. It's that once you spend 100 grand, you've probably interacted with 10 or 20 people, or maybe even 5 people who say similar things with different things that give you different looks. And that's what catapults you.
Totally. Wow, fascinating. That's so insightful. Thank you for sharing all of that information. And when I think about my own story of my own personal development as well, I started. I was at a university when I was 19 here in Canada, studying computer science and business. But then I felt that the university life was not really for me. Like, I loved learning, but I just was not finding inspiration in that world. And then I started running a franchise, renovation sort of franchise business, and that was really the transformation beat for me, because not only was I, having the opportunity to be mentored by these world-class executive coaches, I was also surrounded by these high performers who were similar to me at my age. We were in like law school, business school, but they really were passionate about running a business, and they had that tough mindset that was really crucial for me. And I think that was one of the big turning points for me as well, and that really made an impact for myself. So, question for you, Johnny, is tell me more about your program for high ticket closers and helping coaches sort of through this. Who is this program for, and what would people be potentially gaining from joining your program or your agency?
Yeah. So for me, like, my goal last year was to get out the course that I have, Remote Closer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because COVID and people wanted job opportunities, and I bought all these courses, like, out of the 100 grand was personal development. I also spent another 100 grand on courses about money making activities, because what I would do is I would buy these courses, then I would approach the influencer and I say, hey, I bought your course. I love your course and it works. And I made some money with it. And here's a testimonial, but I also would like to help you sell it.
Mm.
So for the past 5 years, I've been buying courses, going through people's programs to approach them as my own way of getting like a lead magnet out there, or a relationship list, law of reciprocity. Hey, I filled your bank account up a little bit, and I want to fill it up even more, right? And so I would buy these courses to see if they were any good. And I tried, e-commerce. I tried affiliate marketing. I tried, Amazon. I tried, even making money on YouTube. Like, you name it, every get rich quick scheme or money making activity online, I've bought the course and I've tried it. And majority of them I've actually made money with, quite frankly. And what I found was, when people don't make money with it, it's because a lot of what they deal with is themselves and the stories they tell themselves, or they get started and they have this uninformed optimism because they watch that webinar and they watch that VSL, that video sales letter, and they get so hyped on what's possible. They see the testimonials, and that's me, I can do that. And this uninformed optimism. And then they come down and they come up against something, like they try to start the Shopify account for their Amazon or for their drop shipping store, or they're putting listings on Amazon and none of their listings are going to the top, right? And so then they get informed pessimism. And most people get stopped in this informed pessimism stage because they see something, they get excited, because the way your brain works is when it visualizes what's possible, you get all these endorphins and dopamine and chemicals. And then when you're up against something, you get cortisol and you get adrenaline and you get stressed out and you get fight or flight. And so we as human beings, what we do when we have that amygdala, that small almond-sized part of your brain, that's amygdala in Greek, it's a neurological pathway that processes feelings and emotions and fear. And so the difference, your brain doesn't know the difference between a bear attacking you and informed pessimism of your dropshipping store not working. And so what ends up happening is human beings fight or flight, and they retreat, they freeze, they go back to what they were doing. They say, this doesn't work. And, and so that's what I realized, like, how come I always get through that informed pessimism phase with everything I do, and I make money with everything I do? And I realized that a lot of my psychology and my identity came from wrestling and martial arts and training my mind to be unstoppable when up against any obstacle. Because in a fight, in boxing, when I grew up, you can be winning the fight for 99% of the fight, and all it takes is one freaking punch. And you could be winning the wrestling match for 5 minutes and 50 seconds, and it's a 6-minute match, and someone can take you down with 5 seconds left. And there are national champions that have won the national championship in wrestling with 5 seconds left. And so when you're one moment away from success or failure, and there's that sort of pressure, you start to become like unfuckable with when it comes to actually persevering with adversity. And I think the number one thing that is lacking in all courses, and why I never made a course for salespeople, is this helping people through adversity. And so I bought Dan Locke's program. I bought all these programs to study sales training. And why I never wanted to start sales training was because, nothing against Dan Locke, but the problem with high ticket closers in that program was, I think Dan Locke's an exceptional business person and a great marketer. I don't think he's a very good sales trainer. And the reason why is because he does, you have to actually coach people live to actually make the breakthroughs. And that's why I never created a course, because you can't quite actually coach and train and develop people just from a course, because a course is a very static stage. And we know without a doubt how the brain works with neuroplasticity and memory. If you study Jim Quick, which is an amazing guy on memory, had a traumatic brain injury, look him up. He has this philosophy in his book where he's undergone a lot of studies on people's brain and helping them achieve memories and achieve success in their business and life through memory. And he talks about memory being information times energy. And the problem with the course is, like, you wonder, why do two people go through the same thing and have completely different outcomes when it's the same information, right? How come someone can read a Tony Robbins book on Awaken the Giant Within, and it's arguably there's more information and more tactical in that book than his $1,000 UPW Unleash the Power Within seminar, right? How come people can go through the book, but then they can also go through the seminar and they can have a wildly transformational experience from the book, from the seminar, but not the book, right? And this is when you understand it. Your energetic state is everything. And that's why the first thing I teach, besides congruence for being a closer, is being congruent with your principles, passion, and purpose in my closer school. But energy is number 2, where you got to work on your health, your mental, emotional, and spiritual energy, your psychological energy day to day. And that's why I have a standing desk right here. I can push this button and it'll rise up. I teach my closers how to have a gallon of water, eat supplements, eat really clean, fruits and veggies and meats and proteins. If they're vegan, then, consume a lot of iron and amino acids. And so, long story short, information times energy is how people develop memory and actually have lasting change on their subconscious programming. And so if you realize, a lot of your personality comes from those moments where you made up stories because there was an emotional signature that got left on your subconscious mind. And so when my dad told me to quit wrestling, listen, son, I need you to quit wrestling right now. And I created these stories that changed my personality in a moment, even at 17. Why? Because the energetic state was so emotional. Okay. And this is what people don't realize about their identity and their personalities, that you can shift it, but you have to increase the energetic state. And this is where I saw the difference between all the other sales training programs, is they're in a static environment where you're consuming the information, even business opportunities, right? Because they're not scalable unless it's in a course. So the influencer has no interest in creating a coaching element. My closer school is one of the very few that actually has coaching calls included with it, where we actually help you make the leaps and bounds in your coaching game. And so, and the whole goal is not actually even to sell the program. The program is designed, if you can't make the breakthroughs, going through interviewing for our agency and getting placed with influencers, you get the right feedback from us to go do it on your own. We give you a plan and a free course to do it on your own, right? And we also include some coaching and things like that, even for free, right? And then if you want the paid version, it's going deeper and deeper and deeper for people who are really committing to being a closer. And that's where I think, like Dan Locke and Grant Cardone, and nothing against them, I think they're amazing business owners. I learn a lot from them. They're incredible what they do. But what they did is they made it too much about them and being this, having this certificate and being this high ticket closer. And entrepreneurs and influencers could care less what certificate you have. They could care less about who you got trained by. They want to know, what have you done lately? Why are you passionate about my business? Why are you so convicted that my product, my service is going to be something that changes people's lives at the other end of the phone, that you're so convicted, you're so congruent as a closer to sell that, to be passionate about that, and to live that, to be inside of your skin. And the first thing I teach is conviction and belief, and having every last molecule in your body be about that product and service. And so we do deep spiritual work about your congruence, and we have this manifesto that's like a Bible to develop your spirituality and products and services. And people have this unbelievable passion when they come out of the other side of this process, that their life is transformed. They come out a great closer, an ethical person that's heart-centered, that changes people's lives. But not only that, they also have amazing relationships outside of actually closing. And that's what I didn't have in my 20s, because none of it had transformational education. And so I love Vishen Lakhiani and what he does with Mind Valley, because I truly believe we don't need more information. We need more transformation. And so if you're watching this, Vishen, you are an inspiration to me. And that's what I have all of my courses be about: transformational education, changing people's psyche and psychology so that they're capable of more, so they can fill their cup up before they fill others on the phone. And that's what's different about my process and my program. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I wish I had something like this. And I don't want to see people in the marketplace like forcing conversations and doing things that they don't want to do. And not because they're a bad salesperson or they have bad tactics or they had bad sales trainers because they bought other people's programs, but they just don't know any better. And the reason I don't know any better, David, is because you could still get a 10 or 20% close rate with other people's tactical stuff. So why even change it? Why even question it, right? And that's what gives all those other sales trainers validity in the marketplace, because if they teach sales training and building rapport, objection handling, they are actually teaching something that's valuable to the listener, to the closer. And I invite people to consider, who's watching this, that there's incremental growth, which you're going to get from people like Dan Locke and Grant Cardone and all these other sales trainers. I think their stuff is great. And then there's quantum leaps in your game, where when I went to that wrestling camp, I bottled their formulas up into my sales training, because when I left that, I went from not even a ranked wrestler to a top 5 wrestler in 1 month, in 1 month. And so I take all those ideologies that they did in that camp and that intensity, and I show people how to have that life-changing, life-altering experience where you can go and get it in an instant. It's not even time dependent. It's like you're here and then you're like a chinchilla and you're rapidly here. And that's the quantum sales method that I teach, that rapidly transforms people's communication, the way they listen, and what's possible for them when they're interacting with prospects. And so I have so much passion around it, because you could tell I believe in it, because I've seen the change that people have. And I still have closers from years ago in all my consulting engagements that still hit me up. Hey, I still utilize all your tactics, all your strategies. You've changed my life. My marriage is never the same without you. And so this is what motivates me and inspires me and jolts me out of bed every day to help people with this.
Wow, fascinating stuff. You're clearly very passionate about this, and it's contagious. I definitely understand the idea that, for us to be successful salespeople, it goes beyond just saying the right words, right? It goes beyond just saying a few nice lines and handling objections properly. It's a whole total work, and it goes what your mindset, what are you thinking, how you visualizing the situation. And sometimes things in our subconscious, if we don't take care of them, they will show up, whether in the way we respond to people or the energy levels. And I do appreciate the whole spiritual aspect to that. I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. And of course, I'll be sharing the links to your program on this podcast episode. But one last question I do have for you, and this has to do with emotional intelligence and balance. A lot of the things you were saying, some of the themes that I was, kind of just observing in the background has to do with self-awareness, which is knowing where you are, whether it's emotionally, physically, mentally, understanding where you are at every given points. And you mentioned you referenced something about the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is not knowing what you don't know, and why you need a coach to kind of help you see the bigger picture. But can you share with me some of the ways you've been able to walk on and improve your self-awareness? And for someone who is maybe struggling on self-awareness, how can they take that first step to even improve that?
That's a really good question. Before I answer that question, what I'd like to, anybody watching this, like, you don't have to share my remote closer link. You can just share my Instagram and people can hit me up. I don't want people just buying my programs and services or like, I'm all about selling in the new economy. And the first thing I teach is it has to be the prospect's idea, right? And so it would be incongruent for me to come on this podcast and teach all this selling the new economy and this quantum selling method, and then you're promoting my course in the bottom, right? So I actually don't want you to do that. And in fact, what I want you to do is just point people to my profile, and anybody watching this, I have free resources for you. And I have a free course for 30 hours on how to sell high ticket or just sales in general that, quite frankly, I've bought every sales trainer's course out there. The free course that I have is going to be more valuable than anything you see on the internet when it comes to a paid course. So you can just give them access to that free course if you want to put something in the link. I don't want anyone paying me unless I've developed a relationship or I've added so much value, because I truly feel as an entrepreneur, as a salesperson, you're only as successful as the amount of value that you add to others. And one of my mentors has one of the 9 million podcast downloads for his lifetime cash flow podcast, Rod Cleef. To this day, I still work with him as a client. And he's also one of my great friends and great mentors. And he delivered a podcast for a whole year and a half. And he gave away 20,000 copies of his book that literally teaches you how to go from zero to buying your first apartment building, like guaranteed almost, right? And so, and he would say, like, don't guarantee anything, Johnny. And I'm like, well, dude, like, your process is so good that I would almost guarantee it, And so, yeah. So long story short, that anybody watching this, bro, like, I want people to adopt a new way of thinking. Like, I am like looking to actually be that transformation for people. And so it would be incongruent for me. But to answer your question, how do you increase self-awareness? Great question. Fantastic question. So the first thing is you need to assume a lot. Now, this is a very counter intuitive answer, but you actually need to assume, and you're taught growing up that assumptions make an ass out of you and me. Assume ass out of you and me, right? Probably heard that, yeah?
Yes.
And it does. It actually does kind of get you in confrontational situation. And what I teach is pre-frame before you ask an assumptive question. So before you assume something, pre-frame it so that what you're doing is blocking the other person's perception of that question being asked. So don't take this the wrong way, David. Or I invite you to consider, or is it all right with you if I can give you some feedback on how you should actually pose my course, right? So if you notice, going back, I actually pre-framed that feedback I gave you, right? And what I did is I lessered the effect of the feedback I gave you, because people don't want feedback unless it's solicited. Right. And so you have to ask for permission first before you give it. Okay. And the same applies for assuming something. But you have to start to create data. And what I did, I was on over 10,000 phone calls from age 22 to 28. And what I did on those 10,000 phone calls, I have data sheets. I created like data entry sheets on every call I ever went on, and the assumptions I made. I assumed that this person had a kid. I assumed that this person, hated their job before they actually said it. And what I did, I started picking up all these psychological cues. And so I have these recorded calls and I have these assumptions and these data entries that I created across 10,000 phone calls. And I was just like arduous with this, because going back, and you notice I was a pre-medicine major. I was a science major. I love science experiments and I love experimenting with sales. And so a lot of my sales training is unorthodox because it's actually tested across calls. And so I would experiment with calls to the point where I started analyzing the behavioral patterns of people. And so you want to increase your self-awareness. Assume a lot, but pre-frame before you do, because when you start to assume, you'll test your ability to actually read. So you have to actually practice reading. You can't study reading. You have to read in real time. Right. That makes sense? That's step one. Step two is you actually have to read a lot of books about getting outside of your body and identifying blind spots and point of view. A great book is A Visible Hand by, I think, John Smith, or John Smith or Adam Smith. Okay, it's a great book on economics about how.
The economist Adam Smith. Yeah.
You will learn a lot about being an impartial spectator in that and what's happening there, right? So read books where you can leave your body and look at your life, right? And another book is Art of the Motorcycle Maintenance, Zen of the Art of the Motorcycle Maintenance, I believe it was. And also, the Galaxy book, the hidden, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
To the Galaxy, yeah.
I think actually Elon Musk was on Clubhouse the other day recommending that, and he said he didn't understand the meaning of life until he actually read that the meaning of life is to understand the universe, right? And to understand it's expanding. And right, you got to understand you're expanding. And when your psyche is not expanding, like you're not part of the universe, you're incongruent with the universe. So if the universe is infinite and expanding, you need to be constantly infinite and expanding. So, so step 3 is investing in your growth and constantly growing. All right. So the 3 steps are reading and assuming, but pre-framing before you do, so you can practice your perceptiveness. You need to, you need to start reading books and about leaving your body and being an impartial spectator, and investing into coaches and mentors that can help you leave your body and understand your psyche from the outside and observe yourself from the outside. And the third thing is constantly investing in your growth and constantly expanding and being this person who's infinite in your expansion, because yesterday's transformation is tomorrow's ego trip. Okay. And the last thing I would say, probably like the miscellaneous, the extra credit, the bonus points is, is study people who are really good at reading. Study people who are good at cues. Like watch YouTube videos of people who read patterns and pattern recognition, and start actually practicing pattern recognition. When you see someone in TV shows, when they're insecure, their self-esteem is low because they asked a woman out, like when you watch like Topanga, and you watch a show like in the 90s, like a Disney Channel, and you watch, Screech and Saved by the Bell, ask someone out, pay attention to his social cues, his nonverbal and verbal communication. Like what does he do with his body language, and what does he do with his speech and his tonality, and start to document patterns in your mind. Actually start to journal and introspect once a week on, okay, what are the cues, what are the body language of someone that's confident, that's really, really into what they're doing, really passionate about what they're doing. Start to document someone who's confident, someone who lacks self-esteem, someone who's worried. And you'll start to actually be able to read people from their tonality, from their language, from their everything. And then once you get really good at it, you know exactly what people are thinking and doing before they're actually even saying it. Totally. And I've gotten so good at it, I'm like, oh my God, that person is doing this, and this. And then I'll pre-frame and assume, and they're like, you're so right. How did you know that? Right? And so then now when you can be perceptive, you can start to influence the future, because you know what patterns you're falling under and what you're getting limited. And having that self-awareness is when you can admit you're messing up too. So the last thing I would say, step 5, is admit your faults first things first, and identify your faults by debriefing every day to seeing what you can do better, what went well, what could have gone better. Debrief every day, every week, every month, every quarter, every year. Okay. And get alone and debrief deeply with journals. And there's actually a billionaire named Zeb, and you look him up, Zeb Evans of ClickUp. They just scaled to $1 billion. Evaluation, their productivity software tool like Asana, project management and productivity. And the dude for 7 years straight has taken all his journals for 7 years, and he goes for a week or two, and all he does is read his journals. And he journals every day. And so I find the most brilliant people and the people who are most self-aware and can recognize patterns and change their patterns and influence others to shift their patterns are hyper entrepreneurs, hyper brilliant, and can grow so fast. And so the only way you can actually access self-awareness is through spending time with the self. That's where I'll
fascinating insight. Thank you, Johnny. Wow, so much value in this conversation. We could almost talk for an hour, but I know time is at a premium, and we do have to go. But thank you very much for coming on the show. So much wisdom you've shared. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, David, for having me on. And anybody watching this, listen. You got to understand the quality of your life comes down to the quality of your relationships. Okay. And you notice when you have great relationships, you have an awesome life. You feel a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, right? Because you're around people that are on the same mission as you. Whenever you've had like toxic relationships or things not working or relationships aren't going well in your friends and family circle, you notice like you're not very happy in your life. And so the quality of your relationships is the quality of your life. And the quality of those relationships starts in the quality of your communication in those relationships. And your communication before you're in a relationship actually starts with the one with yourself. So if you don't alter yourself and the communication you have about you and how you see your world and how you behave in the world and what's possible for you, if you limit yourself and you don't communicate powerfully to yourself of what's possible, you're never going to be able to attract the relationships and the quality of life. And so anybody watching this, thank you for watching this. Please invest in your communication, invest in yourself. There's nothing more important than becoming really good at sales, persuasion, influence, and overall just being an excellent communicator. So thanks for watching this. Thanks for having me on, David. And this is one of my best podcasts I've ever been on. You just really have a way of being about you, your calmness, your energy, your solitude just like really like makes me feel at home. And so I just want to acknowledge you before I jump off here. You're my immigration brother, right? Like my first generation or zero generation brother. So thanks for having me, and I'm glad that we have that in common, and I can't wait to be on again in the future.
Thank you, Johnny. It's been a pleasure. I'll reach out to you on Instagram and we'll take this from there. Thanks again.
Thank you, kind sir. Have a beautiful day.
You too.